Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ali.
Walaikum assalam.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Could you give us a brief introduction about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dhanji. I'm a financial advisor with Raymond James here in Houston, Texas. I've been in the industry for almost 15 years and have worked extensively in Asia, Africa, Middle East, and now the United States. I help community members with their Sharia-compliant investing and faith-based investing needs. And as a financial advisor, I focus on working with technology and healthcare professionals for their financial needs. The ultimate goal is to help them simplify their finances so that they can have a successful financial future and be able to make educated and informed financial decisions.
What made you become a financial advisor?
So I grew up in Pakistan in a family of modest means. When I was in my senior year, around that age, I lost three crucial family members, my father, my elder brother, and my grandfather. All three of them being the breadwinners in the family. I saw difficult times. Like many families, we had financial aspirations, but we never planned, because when the times are good, you're least worried about the bad times. And unfortunately, when those things happen is when you realize the importance of planning your finances and having things in order. So I saw the struggles my mother went through and the way we were raised through difficult means. And that's when I took up the challenge that I wanted to do something to help people not go through the similar situations that I have been. And that led me to do my MBA in finances and enter the field of wealth management.
What are the most common challenges that people face when they're dealing with their finances?
It's hard to generalize the challenges that people face because everyone's situation is unique and their challenges obviously are unique as well. People who are young in their careers, who are just starting out their professional lives, for them the biggest challenge is about budgeting and finding the right balance between their income and spending. As people grow in their careers, then the budgeting takes the back seat. The investing part of the growing their wealth in a cost and tax efficient way becomes a priority. The next stage, once you kind of get married or start a family, obviously the family's well-being becomes a key point of discussion, and then education planning, retirement planning, those kind of conversations take the center stage. The next is people plan for their own retirement. So at that time, to know whether you've saved enough for your short-term and long-term goals is a key concern, and whether you would have enough in retirement to sustain yourself or not. And then the last is for the retirees to make sure how they spend their retirement, and at the same time, what legacy would they leave behind for the next generations and the charitable causes they care about. So overall, it's hard to generalize, but if I have to sum it all together, I think the key challenges that I've seen people facing are around budgeting, planning for life's uncertainties like loss of a family member, disability, divorce, addition to the family and stuff like that. Investing in a tax cost-efficient way, plus the Sharia requirements is another key concern. And then the last would be the diversification of income streams and assets that they hold.
Could you elaborate on what exactly is a good budgeting strategy and how much should one spend versus save?
Let me begin by saying that personal finance is personal. So everyone's situation is different and the answers to those situations are also very different. While preparing a budgeting strategy, there is no silver bullet which would address everyone's concern. However, there are certain guidelines that are available which people follow while preparing a budgeting strategy. The most common one I've seen is the 50-30-20 strategy, which states that 50% of your after-tax income should be dedicated towards your needs. Things like paying off rent or mortgage, utilities, food, groceries, things that will sustain your livelihood. 30% should be dedicated towards your wants and wishes, things like shopping, eating out, Netflix and stuff like that. And then the last 20% should go towards your savings. Now that's the general guideline. I tend to use a strategy which is slightly reversed, which states that 20, 50 and 30. The 20 being first, or the savings part of it being first, because for two reasons mainly. First, that you should be saving first and spending later. That's a personal belief I follow as well, and I do advise my clients to follow that as well. And the second is that we live in different states. The cost of living in each state is very different. Someone living in California and New York versus somebody living in Texas or Florida will have a completely different cost of living when it comes to needs. So if you've saved your 20%, the remaining part of your disposable income should actually first go towards your needs, which will be your basic requirements for your livelihood. And then whatever is left from there is something that you can decide whether you want to spend on your wants and wishes, or you want to incrementally save that.
How can one budget for sadaqah and other charitable aspirations using this 20-50-30 strategy?
Ideally, the charitable contributions are part of the wants and wishes. So you can have an allocation over there as part of the wants and wishes. For someone, if the money doesn't allow them to be in the wants and wishes, and they can actually contribute through their needs or by reducing their savings as well. For us, obviously, our faith requires and pays a lot of importance on giving our due share to the community, and obviously for other requirements as well. So I highly recommend make it part of the needs, or even if you have to compromise a little bit on the savings to fulfill the faith requirements, you should do that.
How should one go about saving for a rainy day?
Well, that's a great question and a very timely one too. Rainy day fund, or otherwise commonly known as an emergency fund or a contingency fund, is actually an allocation in your budget that you assign for a future mishap which may result in unforeseen expenses. It's ideally used to avoid any debt or using of credit, or actually dipping into your long-term retirement assets. I've commonly seen people using an emergency fund or a rainy day fund to fulfill their medical bills or repairs on their cars or homes due to some unforeseen situations, or even just paying off some debt that they already have, which is causing a problem to them. It's become very timely point of discussion because of the pandemic. I think last couple of months or year, we've seen a lot of people losing their income through either being unemployed or due to business income coming to a complete stoppage. These are the times where you need to plan and have a rainy day fund, so that, again, you don't need to use credit or fall into debt just to sustain your basic livelihood.
What would happen if you were to lose your job?
Losing a job can be, it can have a long-term psychological or financial effects on someone. And it is important to plan for such type of things when the times are good. However, it's a situation that can happen to many of us. We don't control these kind of situations. But if it was to happen, the first thing would be to look at your immediate financial needs. And that would start with maybe negotiating a severance package, re-looking at your budget so that you may decide to live on only needs for now, instead of the wants and wishes that you may have previously allocated towards your budget. The other thing is to look at where you're redirecting your savings and other sources of income that you may have, so that you could sustain your livelihood until you get back on a job again. And while you continue to put your finances in order, I think the other important thing that people forget is, while you're looking for a job, the conventional ways of looking for a job have kind of become obsolete now. I highly recommend people to have a strong digital presence. That's what we see in the industry. People are hired, or when you're getting hired, the first thing an employer would do is to look up your digital history. If you have a strong digital presence and you're showcasing your skills of what you can do or you can bring to the organization in addition to just the 9-to-5 work, that goes a long way. So I highly recommend people to work on building new skills in addition to what they already have, and then showcase them on, through social media or online sources. I personally recommend everyone to have their own individual website as well, because what you cannot put on your resume, you can clearly highlight it on a website as well. So those are a couple of things that I think somebody should follow if in case anything was to happen. But the ideal situation would be to look at and prepare for it before something unforeseen or losing a job type of a situation occurs.
What's the most reliable way of paying off your debt?
So paying down debt versus saving, it's an age-old question, but it's hard to quantify. And there's no one standard answer to it. There are a lot of factors that go into deciding what's the best strategy for you. Not to forget that both of these will actually give you a confident financial future. So if you've thought of doing it, you're on the right track. The way to figure this out, and I think before I get into the ways, I'll probably just highlight one thing, is that not all debt is bad, right? But the interest that you pay on debt is actually a negative rate of return on your investment. So irrespective of how low the interest rate is, you're still having a negative rate of return on interest, or the interest that you're paying. So keeping that in mind, and if you're deciding, if I have extra dollars, whether I should allocate for paying off extra debt, the bare minimum you have to pay, I would not say that you don't pay that you have to pay. But then if you have extra dollars, what should you do? So a couple of factors to look at is, one thing to compare is the rate of return that you would get on your extra dollars versus the interest you would save if you were to allocate that money towards your debt. For example, if you're paying a 20% interest on your credit card, and that is after-tax, non-deductible interest, can you, on the other hand, make after-tax 20% return on a sustainable basis or not? Probably not. So in that case, paying off the interest or paying off the debt would make more sense. However, on the other hand, if you have a 401k which is sponsored by your employer, an employer, let's say, matches up to 6%, of your contribution, that straight away is 50% extra money in addition to what you're contributing. So that's almost 50% gain on the investment that you're making. So over there, in those kind of situations, making a 401k contribution would make more sense instead of paying off debt. Some of the other factors that may include is time duration. If you have a short-term need of money that's coming up, let's say kids going to college, now, you cannot delay their college education, right? So you would probably hold off paying off those extra dollars into your debt versus saving it for that purpose. So time duration is another factor to consider while making that decision. Another one would be whether your loan can be consolidated or could it be refinanced to a lower interest rate. And then lastly, it would be the cutting of expenses. So you may have to relook at your budget to reallocate those dollars, or if you can cut down some expenses where you could contribute to your 401k as well as pay off some extra dollars for your debt.
What suggestions do you have for the community regarding wealth management?
Money is a very sensitive topic, and sometimes it has a negative association with it as well. Of course, as from a faith point of view, we do not want to overemphasize on saving excessively or spending excessively or a lot about money, but I think it's a responsibility to be wise and to be fair with what Allah has blessed us with. And I think there are certain responsibilities that we have to pay attention to. First is obviously, and the biggest concern I come across with community members is finding Sharia compliant ways of investing without compromising on returns. Maybe back in the days there were not many avenues that were available, but now there's plenty of resources, plenty of investment opportunities available which are Sharia compliant, and they can give you, can generate returns pretty much similar to non-conventional or basically conventional investments. The other suggestion that I would have is, and taking from my personal example, is to plan for uncertainties. Health issues, disability, death, divorces, these things happen. I mean, they happen. They're a reality. But when the times are good, if you plan for it, the sufferings would be less. And then the third one, and probably the most important one for me, is the involvement of a family in the financial planning process. Many a times one person in the family would take charge of financial planning, and the other people in the family would be clueless about where the money is invested, how the money is invested. I think it's highly recommended, or at least from my side, I would highly recommend spouses to do this process jointly, so that they're aware. You don't have both have to be decision makers in the process, but at least be aware of what's happening, so that in an unfortunate situation it's much more easier to handle things. So I think those would be my general suggestions, or suggestions to the community members.
What should a community member do if they need help managing their finances?
I think it is highly recommended to everyone to get a second opinion. There are two things a second opinion does. It tells you whether what you're doing is the best thing for you, or it will tell you there's something better out there. In either case, it's a win-win for you, and it doesn't cost you any money as well. So I highly recommend people to get a second opinion about their finances, even if they think they are in control of it, or if there are people out there who want to focus on their 9 to 5, their other priorities in life. There are professionals like myself who help people get these things right, from budgeting to debt management to investing needs as well. If there are any community members who need help, they can reach out to me through the Link313.org website, and I will be happy to help them.
To reach out to Brother Ali Dhanji, check out his Link313 profile in the description below. This video is brought to you by Link313. To sign up for an account, visit Link313.org and expand your communal network.